drinking alcohol, getting intoxicated, and smoking cigarettes, smoking the dried leaves of a plant, a gateway to marijuana, a drug? How could it not be? So, when do they plan on banning cigarettes and alcohol? They have to, they're a gateway to drugs. And if you buy or support drugs, you support terrorism.
Big business does not want us to know that we can cure cancer forever at very low cost.
Pot shrinks tumors. Government knew in 1974. By Raymond Cushing, Alternet. Posted May 31, 2000. In 1974, researchers learned that THC, the active chemical in marijuana, shrank or destroyed brain tumors in test mice. But the DEA quickly shut down the study and destroyed its results, which were never replicated, until now. The term medical marijuana took on dramatic new meaning in February 2000 when researchers in Madrid announced they had destroyed incurable brain tumors in rats by injecting them with THC, the active ingredient in cannabis. The Madrid study marks only the second time that THC has been administered to tumor-bearing animals. The first was a Virginia investigation 26 years ago. In both studies, the THC shrank or destroyed tumors in a majority of the test subjects. Most Americans don't know anything about the Madrid discovery. Virtually no major U.S. newspapers carried the story, which ran only once on the AP and UPI news wires, on February 29, 2000. The ominous part is that this isn't the first time scientists have discovered that THC shrinks tumors. In 1974, researchers at the Medical College of Virginia, who had been funded by the National Institute of Health to find evidence that marijuana damages the immune system, found instead that THC slowed the growth of 3 kinds of cancer in mice, lung and breast cancer, and a virus-induced leukemia. The DEA quickly shut down the Virginia study and all further cannabis tumor research, according to Jack Herert, who reports on the events in his book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes. In 1976, President Gerald Ford put an end to all public cannabis research and granted exclusive research rights to major pharmaceutical companies, who set out, unsuccessfully, to develop synthetic forms of THC that would deliver all the medical benefits without the high. To read this article in its entirety, do an internet search by its title.
Dear old Donnie Rumsfeld, you know, our chief torturer, chief liar on 9/11, one of the chief liars, was the CEO of Searle Pharmaceuticals. Why would the pharmaceutical companies want you to be able to grow a plant in your backyard that might cure your menstrual cramps, might solve your headache, might give a terminally ill cancer patient you know, some chance at gaining some weight and having a tiny quality of life? If you can grow that in your backyard, there's no net profit for corporations, and we already know what net profit means to stock prices.
The government's main job in relation to the people is to balance pretend to be for citizens' best interest with be for own self-interest, and the interest of corporations, bankers, and others who are not actually citizens. They're paid actors, who get to take part in the stock market, very high-stakes gambling, join prestigious clubs groups, get wined and dined, and commit acts that would be considered criminal and perverted among citizens, acts citizens would go to prison for over 20 years for committing. And they won't let you have marijuana. You want it, they won't let you have it. And you, the people, run the show? Listen to the following excerpts from a very informative book entitled, The Emperor Wears No Clothes. Chapter 3, February 1938, Popular Mechanics Magazine, New Billion-Dollar Crop. February 1928, Mechanical Engineering Magazine, the most profitable and desirable crop that can be grown. Modern technology was about to be applied to hemp production, making it the #1 agricultural resource in America. 2 of the most respected and influential journals in the nation, Popular Mechanics and Mechanical Engineering, forecast a bright future for American hemp. Thousands of new products creating millions of new jobs would herald the end of the Great Depression. Instead, hemp was persecuted, outlawed and forgotten at the bidding of W. R. Hearst, who branded hemp the Mexican killerweed, marijuana. As early as 1901 and continuing to 1937, the U.S. Department of Agriculture repeatedly predicted that, once machinery capable of harvesting, stripping and separating the fiber from the pulp was invented or engineered, hemp would again be America's #1 farm crop. The introduction of G.W. Schlichten's decorticator in 1917 nearly fulfilled this prophecy. See pages 13-15 and appendix. The prediction was reaffirmed in the popular press when Popular Mechanics published its February 1938 article, Billion Dollar Crop. The first reproduction of this article in over 50 years was in the original edition of this book. The article is reproduced here exactly as it was printed in 1938. Also reprinted in this chapter is an excerpt from the Mechanical Engineering article about hemp, published the same month. It originated as a paper presented a year earlier at the February 26, 1937 Agricultural Processing Meeting of the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, New Brunswick, New Jersey. Reports from the USDA during the 1930s, and congressional testimony in 1937, showed that cultivated hemp acreage had been doubling in size in America almost every year from the time it hit its bottom acreage, 1930, when 1,000 acres were planted in the U.S. to 1937, when 14,000 acres were cultivated, with plans to continue to double that acreage annual in the foreseeable future. The Popular Mechanics article was the very first time in American history that the term $billion was ever applied to any U.S. agricultural crop. Equivalent to $40 to $80 billion now. New billion-dollar crop. Popular Mechanics, February 1938. American farmers are promised new cash crop with an annual value of several $100 million, all because a machine has been invented which solves a problem more than 6,000 years old. It is hemp, a crop that will not compete with other American products. Instead, it will displace imports of raw material and manufactured products produced by underpaid coolie and peasant labor, and it will provide thousands of jobs for American workers throughout the land. The machine which makes this possible is designed for removing the fiber-bearing cortex from the rest of the stalk, making hemp fiber available for use without a prohibitive amount of human labor. Hemp is the standard fiber of the world. It has great tensile strength and durability. It is used to produce more than 5,000 textile products, ranging from rope to fine laces, and the woody herds remaining after the fiber has been removed contains more than 77% cellulose, and can be used to produce more than 25,000 produces, ranging from dynamite to cellophane. Thousands of tons of hemp herds are used every year by one large powder company for the manufacture of dynamite and TNT. A large paper company, which has been paying more than $1 million a year in duties on foreign-made cigarette papers, now is manufacturing these papers from American hemp grown in Minnesota. A new factory in Illinois is producing fine bond papers from hemp. The natural materials in hemp make it an economical source of pulp for any grade of paper manufactured, and the high percentage of alpha cellulose promises an unlimited supply of raw material for the thousands of cellulose products our chemists have developed. Breakthrough in paper making. If hemp were legally cultivated using 20th century technology, it would be the single largest agricultural crop in the United States and world today. Popular Mechanics, February 1938. Mechanical Engineering, February 1938. U.S. Department of Agriculture Reports 1903, 1910, 1913. In fact, when the preceding two articles were prepared early in 1937, hemp was still legal to grow. And these who predicted billions of dollars in new cannabis businesses did not consider income from medicines, energy, fuel and food, which would now add another $1 trillion or more annually to our coming natural economy compared to our synthetic, environmentally troubled economy. Relaxational smoking would add only a relatively minor amount to this figure. The most important reason that the 1938 magazine articles projected billions in new income was hemp for pulp paper as opposed to fiber or rag paper. Other reasons were for its fiber, seed and many other pulp uses. A conspiracy to wipe out the natural competition. In the mid-1930s, when the new mechanical hemp fiber stripping machines and machines to conserve hemp's high cellulose pulp finally became state-of-the-art, available and affordable, the enormous timber acreage and businesses of the Hearst Paper Manufacturing Division, Kimberly-Clark USA, St. Regis, and virtually all other timber, paper and large newspaper holding companies, stood to lose billions of dollars and perhaps go bankrupt. Coincidentally, in 1937, DuPont had just patented processes for making plastics from oil and coal, as well as a new sulfate-sulfite process for making paper from wood pulp. According to DuPont's own corporate records and historians, these processes accounted for over 80% of all the company's railroad car loadings over the next 60 years into the 1990s. Authors Research and Communications with DuPont, 1985 to 1996. If hemp had not been made illegal, 80% of DuPont's business would never have materialized and the great majority of the pollution which has poisoned our northwestern and southeastern rivers would not have occurred. In an open marketplace, hemp would have saved the majority of America's vital family farms and would probably have boosted their numbers, despite the Great Depression of the 1930s. But competing against environmentally sane hemp paper and natural plastic technology would have jeopardized the lucrative financial schemes of Hearst, DuPont and DuPont's chief financial backer, Andrew Mellon of the Mellon Bank of Pittsburgh.
Something happened in 1940 which marked the beginning of a new era, the era of the ability to synthesize and create on an unlimited scale new chemicals that had never existed before in the world.
And using the magic of research, oil companies compete with each other in taking the petroleum molecule apart and rearranging it into, well, you name it.
So suddenly it became possible to produce any new chemicals, synthetic chemicals, the likes of which had never existed before in the world, for any purpose and at virtually no cost.
Fabrics, toothbrushes, tires, insecticides, cosmetics, weed killers, a whole galaxy of things to make a better life on Earth.
For instance, if you wanted to go to a chemist and say, look, I want to have a chemical, say a pesticide, which will persist throughout the food chain, and I don't want it to have to renew it very, very often. I'd like it to be relatively non-destructible. And then he'd put two benzene molecules on the blackboard and add a chlorine here and a chlorine that, and that was DDT.
When the 8th Army needed Jap civilians to help them out in our occupation, they called on native doctors to administer DDT under the supervision of our men to stem a potential typhus epidemic. Dusting like this goes a long way in checking disease, and the laughs are them. Pardon our dust.
As the petrochemical era grew and grew, warning signs emerged that some of these chemicals could pose hazards. The data initially were trivial, anecdotal, but gradually a body of data started accumulating to the extent that we now know that the synthetic chemicals which have permeated our workplace, our consumer products, our air, our water, produce cancer and also birth defects and some other toxic effects. Furthermore, industry has known about this, at least most industries have known about this, and have attempted to trivialize these risks.
Social reorganization. A series of secret meetings were held. In 1931, Mellon, in his role as Hoover's Secretary of the Treasury, appointed his future nephew-in-law, Harry J. Anslinger, to be head of the newly reorganized Federal Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs (FBNDD), a post he held for the next 31 years.